Okay, so here we are with lesson number 6. And so in this lesson, let me just, very simply review how we've analyzed change so far. So far we've analyzed change by invoking a principle that persists through the change, which we call matter, and a principle that is acquired or changes, if you will, through the change, that is new, and that we call form. And at the beginning, there's the privation of the form, and at the end of the change, there's the acquisition of the form. And then that form can be either an accidental form or a substantial form. Okay, but the structure of the change remains the same. Okay, so here in this this is a bit of a parenthesis in our sequence of lessons, because I'm going to show a way to get to dual principles, which we will also call matter and form, that is independent from the question of change. And that's a way that may actually be familiar to people who've studied maybe Platonic philosophies or other philosophies. It is present in Aristotle, but not really actually fully developed. For Aristotle, the question of change was much more dominant. And Aquinas certainly highlighted this other way, and by synthesizing things that he took from the Neoplatonist and that sort of thing. But let me cut to the chase here. And so we're going to get to the question of to the principles of matter and form by way of the question that is sometimes labeled as the problem of the one and the many, or the problem of the multiplicity of individuals. And that of course is an ancient problem. It brings to mind Plato's Platonic philosophy, but the question is, look, here we are, a multiplicity of individuals, each one really distinct, yet at the same time the same, because I'm distinct from you, but we're also the same. We're both human beings, right? We're not the same as the bench or the sky or the dog or the tree. We distinguish ourselves, so we're both similar and dissimilar. We're clearly distinct, and we sense our distinctness as individuals very strongly. And in fact, as you recall, it's we said that it's a recurrent theme in the Aristotelian-Thomistic philosophy, that much of what we know is what is most familiar, and we're very familiar as being ourselves very distinct individuals. But at the same time, I think we hold firmly that we belong to a class of same individuals, right? So there's a distinction. So there's the question of the multiplicity of individuals. We see it among human beings. By analogy, we see it, in other beings as well. So we see it in animals. So we'll say that, these are, it's dog and dog, right? So Fido and Rover, each is distinct, but they're also the same. They're also both dogs, right? We see it in even less developed forms like, trees. So we see a pine forest. Each is a pine tree, but at the same time, each is an individual pine tree, but they're all pine trees, and so forth. And even down to the level of the inanimate. Okay, we can say that this is water, and it's individually distinct from the water here, or the olive oil here is individually distinct from the olive oil in the bottle, but they're both olive oil. They're both the same. Okay, so there's that. So we need some way to explain this. How do we explain the sameness and the distinction, right? In all of these beings that are distinct and at the same time, similar. So the multiplicity of individuals in the same species, and now I'm going to introduce the term species to refer to the class of individual substances, if you will, that are the same, right? Individual substances that are the same, there must be a principle of commonality to account for the distinct beings being the same. And at the same time, there must be a principle of individuality to account for beings of the same class also being distinct, right? There has to be something that explains how come I'm a human being and you're a human being and we're not the same, right? And same with the dog and the tree and the water. Okay, so the principle of similarity, we assume that it exists, and we're going to call that the form. And the principle of individuality, we assume that it exists, and we're going to call that matter. Now, this already is going to be a very controversial terminology, and it was controversial even among the Aristotelian scholastics, and that gave rise to a lot of disputes among the Aristotelians as to whether the principle of individuality was really the same matter that we use to explain the principle of continuity in a change. And at this point, we're not going to get into this, but all I wanted to highlight here is that, apart from the question of change, there's another sort of ontological problem about different beings being the same and different, that have nothing to do with change. And that also implies a duality of principles, being at play. And the duality is the duality of form and matter. So Fido, the dog, is dog by virtue of Fido having the form of dog, the dog form, the substantial form of dog. Okay? And that's what makes Fido be a dog. But Fido is this dog, as opposed to that dog. Fido is this dog by virtue of his matter. Okay? So here you can if you think back to a previous lesson, and when we had we talked about the form of the tree, right, being lost when the tree is turned into ashes. Okay, so the form of the tree is what makes the tree be a tree. The form of dog is what makes Fido be a dog. Okay, but Fido is this dog by virtue of his matter. Okay. And so that goes for accidents as well. Okay, so here I'm giving an example about substantial form, right? The dog form is a substantial form. The substantial form of dog makes Fido be a dog. But there's also a multiplicity of accidents. Okay, there is yellow being here in the banana, or in the flower, or in the bee, or in the leaf, or in the watermelon. Okay, but they're all yellow. They're all yellow, but there's this yellow and that yellow and so forth. So same thing, the accidental form of yellow is what makes the banana be yellow, and the bee be yellow, and the flower be yellow, and so forth. But it's matter that makes this yellow, okay, and makes that yellow in the bee, and makes that yellow in the leaf. We'll get into this in much more detail. I'm not going to say much more about this. We'll get into this when we start talking about the senses. We'll get into the accident, the sensibles, and how that works, with the matter, the conjunction of matter and accidental form when we talk about color and color realism and so forth down the line. But I just wanted to bring up that there's this duality that we saw to explain change is a duality that's also present when we have to think about the multiplicity of individuals of the same species. So the banana is yellow by virtue of the yellow form, but the banana is this yellow by virtue of its matter. Okay? So two ways to arrive at matter and form. One that occupied us for the first few lessons, that change exists. Therefore, if we hold on to our principles of intelligibility, therefore, matter and form exist as real principles of change. Same thing here. The multiplicity of individuals is something that we acknowledge as being part of our public experience, an experience that we all share, a feature of the world around us. Individuals exist. Therefore, matter and form exist and are real principles of being. Okay? Granted, here I haven't made explicit the connection that the matter and form that we talk about here is the same matter and form as we talk about here, but I just wanted to introduce these two notions at this point. Any questions here?
That's okay with me.
All right. Well, then I'll see you next time. And next time, we're going to start digging into the concept of matter, okay, with particular attention to this idea of prime matter, which is, should be a little bit mysterious. And so we'll expand on that next time.
Okay.
All right. And see you then.